All right. So we wanted to talk more about where prejudice comes from, and sometimes it's a matter of cognition. It's a matter of what we remember. Okay? Here's a lot of words, but it's a good one. If Harriet tends to selectively remember only those deceptive business relationships with Jews and the honest ones with non-Jews, she is likely to develop an illusory correlation that Jews are more dishonest in their business dealings than non-Jews. This is so even though the percentages of actual instances of business deception in the two groups is equal. Can you think of any? Okay, yeah, so number of business relationships, and I mean, you'd have to look at this thing and really think about the math on it. But this illusory correlation can be the result of bad memory, but this illusory correlations can also be the result of bad press coverage. If the press only covers one type of thing and doesn't cover another type of thing, well then, guess what? You're going to have a biased belief system on. And clearly the major news networks are incredibly slanted one way or another. And if you watch one and not the other, you're going to get a belief that the world is one way. Okay? It's not. All right, whatever. Other cognitive sources, the outgroup homogeneity effect, this notion they're all alike. I mean, people in... all right, I know it's terrible, but when I first married my wife and we would go to a group of Korean people, I'd look around and be like, oh my God, they all look exactly the same. They all have black hair. They all have names that I can't pronounce. They're exactly the same. All right? Well, now I'm in the group now, all right? And now I see it. I know exactly what it is that distinguishes people from each other. I understand differences. But when I first joined these groups, I just didn't understand what it was that distinguished one from another. I hadn't had enough tendencies yet. Or the own race bias, the tendency for people to more accurately recognize faces of their own race. This is a particularly big bias to be considering, especially when you're talking about legal implications. I think we'll talk about that in chapter 13 or 12 or something. So recognition, you know, the race of the photos and the race of the subjects, and look at that, la la la. What? A distinct person? I don't know, but I like this cartoon. I love the cartoon. The vibrations are overwhelming. Two white people afraid of a smart, aggressive African American. I'm sick of their patronizing macho glances. They can't stand a woman being in a responsible position. I can see it in their eyes. They don't like me because I'm gay. I love it. They're all a member of a group, and they all have this stigma consciousness and expectation that they're going to be victimized by prejudice. I like that. Group serving bias. The self-serving bias is, I believe we talked about that in this chapter on the self, but boy, that seems like a lifetime ago. Self-serving bias basically was a tendency to exaggerate our own self, right? To think we're better than we are. Remember we had said, for example, in fact, that was it. Remember just now, in this chapter we had white Americans felt that 44% of other white Americans were highly prejudiced, but only 14% felt that they themselves were highly prejudiced. That's a self-serving bias right there. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. Well, take that to one more extreme, the group-serving bias, and that is to say members of my own group are better than the average of other groups. Okay? Here, the member of our group failed to contribute because he needs every penny to support his family. The member of that group failed to contribute because she's cheap and selfish. Okay? We'll definitely come more to some of that stuff. But this is the one that really, to me, seems to be the most interesting. It's a really scary, to be honest. It's the just world phenomenon, or as I like to call it, the cosmic karma. Of course, karma is this belief in the Hindu religion whereby people are reincarnated, and what you're experiencing in this lifetime is a result of what occurred in your previous lifetime. And so if you were a real shithead in your previous lifetime, you're going to suffer in this lifetime. Okay? And you have the opportunity, even though you're suffering, to do the best you can, and the idea is to move forward or something like this. Well, this idea of karma is sort of out there, And I mean, we could talk prejudice too, but in particular when it comes to things like mental illness. People don't want to say it, but it's true. You know, they see somebody with, let's say, schizophrenia, and they say, like, you know, if you would have just tried harder, or as in many religious beliefs, if somebody has schizophrenia, the reason you have schizophrenia is God doesn't like you. You screwed up. You did something wrong. I don't know what it was, but there's something about you that's not good enough, or you wouldn't have that. And this is the same type of a belief system. That is to say, if members of this group are poor in poverty, they deserve it. I don't know what they did, but the world is fair, right? And so we find, you know, just observing another innocent person being victimized is enough to make that person look like a bad person. Okay? You just see them being picked on, and that's enough for you to say that person is no good. What do we got there? Boring. Minority group members tend to behave in a way they think members of their group are supposed to behave, and judge members of their group. Ogbu suggests, oh Lord. This is an interesting paragraph right here, but I'll tell you what. You go through that one on your own. That is really, really interesting. Controversial, of course, but very, very interesting paragraph. What else do I got? Stereotype threat. Let me see the stereotype threat example first. They did a study, and what they did was, of course, there's a cultural stereotype. Women aren't as good at math as men. That's the cultural stereotype. And so what happened was, you know, they brought people into the lab. Boy, I'm going to probably get the details wrong, but they brought people into the lab, and what they did was they basically subtly told them about this stereotype. I mean, everybody knows, but, you know, women aren't so great at math or some shit like this, right? I mean, look at the Teen Talk Barbie. Math class is tough. By the way, they took Teen Talk Barbie off the shelves in about 5 minutes. You think the Mattel company could handle a lawsuit on that one? So they reminded them about this cultural stereotype, and then they gave a math test to some men and some women. And they matched up the men and the women based on their SAT math scores. So they knew for a fact that these kids had the same SAT math score. But lo and behold, the women scored significantly lower than the men on this math test after reminding them about this cultural stereotype. Okay? And so stereotype threat is a disruptive concern when facing a negative stereotype. Unlike self-fulfilling prophecies that hammer or whatever. Okay. But, you know, and when reminded about this stereotype, people respond to it and try almost become it. Reducing prejudice. I have a very little bit on that. Obviously, education. But that's not enough, okay? I already told you that. Education is a wonderful way to reduce blatant prejudice. Prejudicism is not a word. I got to cut that from my vocabulary. But education does not lead to lower levels of subtle prejudice. Remember what does, and I'm telling you this research I did was just beautifully clean about it. What did was not contact. See here, the contact hypothesis. Under certain conditions, contact between antagonistic groups will reduce prejudice. Instead of antagonistic, that's pretty harsh. Contact between different racial groups will reduce contact between different racial groups will reduce prejudice if, not just contact, because there was lots of contact between white dudes and the slaves, okay? There was lots of contact. No, equal status contact, sustained close contact, intergroup cooperation. We're going to come back to that us versus them cooperation when we get to the peacemaking chapter. Social norms favoring equality, friendship potential. As I said, it's not just contact, it's positive contact. How much positive interactions have you had with these people? So it's not all bad news, okay? One degree of prejudice is going away. The other degree is slower, but we're getting there, okay? And so we're done with Chapter 9. We have another chapter of naughty stuff, right? We'll do aggression next. But then we're on to the positive stuff, see, because I have a positive feeling about human beings, so we'll come back to those in a minute, all right?